Hello, my name's Nico Franks. I'm the editor of C21 Kids magazine at C21 Media, which is a leading UK-based provider of breaking news and industry intel to the international entertainment community. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on wherever you may be watching us from. Welcome to my bedroom. I want to begin this afternoon by thanking all the CMC patron partners and sponsors who have backed this regular programme of content. So thank you to BBC Children's, CITV, Daryl McQueen, NBC Universal, and the Elf Factory. So this is the second in the series of CMC Friday webinars, which CMC can now confirm will take place every fortnight on Fridays at 3 p.m. from now on. Here are the next two. So we've got content in the time of Corona, which will take a look at the various forms of content for TV, digital and social media that's been produced with the crisis in mind. And after that, on May the 29th, you can join in a conversation with the BBC's Cheryl Taylor. All of these, including today's event, can be found shortly after the event on the CMC YouTube channel, where you can also see a great archive of CMC keynotes, changemakers, masterclasses, and more. Today's event has been produced by two members of the CMC Advisory Committee, Julia Posen and Helen McAleer. And they tell me that they want to keep this as interactive as possible. So please post questions by using the Q&A button at the bottom, towards the bottom of your screen there. One note of warning, don't send questions using the Zoom email facility. Even though Zoom insists on describing this as 4 questions, no one is reading those. So use the Q&A button that works. Now, as with all these CMC webinars, there's some bonus content at the end. So don't dash away when we finish speaking, because we'll be showing the first in a new series of videos made by creatives for CMC called The Inner Child, exploring their childhood influences. And today's is Keith Chapman. So now to the main part of today's webinar, where we plan to outline as much as we can the initiatives and the resources available to freelancers during these very difficult times. Figures show that almost half of the UK's freelancers have had 100% of their work cancelled since the COVID-19 pandemic. And we're going to be discussing some of the campaign work that is going on to support them and hopefully offer some clarity to all the freelancers out there. So here are our panelists. We've got Jack Powell, who is the Senior Policy Analyst at the BFI, Victoria Burnip, who is Employment and Business Immigration Lawyer at Doyle Clayton, Andy da Costa, who is Accountancy Partner at HHC Limited, and Emma Reeves, who is a freelance writer and Chair of the TV Committee of the Writers Guild of Great Britain. So for more info on their backgrounds, you can head to the CMC website, and that's all there. And all of our speakers are experts in their respective fields. So we're going to kick off by having each of them take us through their areas of expertise and the advice that they can offer freelancers before we present your questions to them. So do please send those in. So Jack, we're going to kick off with you.
Hi everyone. As Nico said, I'm Jack and I work on the policy team at the BFI. For those of you that don't know, the BFI works as the kind of lead body for film and the moving image in the UK. And as such, we've kind of been tasked by government with coordinating the response of the screen sectors to the incredible challenges that COVID-19 poses to all of us, right across the value sector and across different kind of subsectors too. You know, from people like yourselves working in children's media through to people working in cinema exhibition. Or making independent film. Obviously, this is a huge scope, and as such, we bring together people's opinions, people's issues, and people's proposed solutions through something called the Screen Sector Task Force, which has above 70 representatives, including unions, national screen agencies, trade bodies such as PACT, so that the sector can speak with one voice and have kind of one coordinated response to COVID-19. That it can communicate to government, so that we are completely joined up and that nobody's kind of played off against each other when we come to looking at solutions. What I wanted to use my first couple of minutes for is just to identify the short-term issues and the medium to long-term issues with regard to freelancers that we are very aware of and are pushing on as much as we can. I'll then hand over to Victoria and Andy, who I know are going to talk about the finer points of some of the government support that's there. Anything else we can pick up in the chat afterwards. So, as I'm sure many of you are aware and very keen to talk about today, one of the big issues that we face in the immediate is the workforce support the government has made available in the immediate to people who are facing difficulties or are out of work because of COVID-19. Now, things like the job retention scheme and the self-employment income support scheme are very welcome and go away to mitigating the impact of COVID-19 on some parts of the screen sectors, but many freelancers are not covered by these measures. So our research and statistics unit have looked at the stats on the kind of 85,000 people that work in our sector. We reckon of all freelancers, about a third of people are working as PAYE freelancers, a third of people are working as sole traders, and a third are working as kind of personal service companies that loan themselves out. And each of these has an issue with existing support. PAYE freelancers, again, as I know many of you will be aware, fall between the cracks of the job retention scheme because they were not employed at the cut-off date for people to access that money. We estimate that just over 20,000 people aren't able to access support through that scheme. And that's before you kind of get to the point, the question of people that are eligible, theoretically, but who were contracted with an independent producer, for example, who are not able to cash flow people until they get support. Victoria's going to pick up on the final points of this in a minute, I think. With people that work as personal service companies, they may pay themselves largely in dividends, which are not covered by self-employment income support. So a lot of their wages aren't compensated for either. And then with those that work as sole traders, you need 3 years of returns in order to access support through that scheme, which a lot of new entrants don't have either. So these are issues that we really need to get sorted in the short term, not only because people need that money to survive, but also if we want to retain workforce that we have for kind of after this point, we need to make sure that people can kind of continue to pursue this as an area of work. And there's people that are particularly vulnerable financially, which often is young people, new entrants to the sector, people from diverse backgrounds and people across the nations and regions that may have to look elsewhere for work due to issues with stability. With regards to what we're doing on these issues, obviously we're pressing government on this as much as we can. We've provided them with all the evidence that we have on this and are pushing for further support for various kinds of freelancers financially. We also have a couple of mitigations it's worth noting. So the Film and TV charity partnered with us on a fund. It's about £3 million made available through donations from various sector organisations that provided kind of bursaries to those in immediate financial need. The first wave of that is closed. We had about £5 million worth of demand on that, which shows you the scale of the issue. And they're currently looking at kind of fundraising to do a second wave of that. So keep an eye out for that with Film and TV charity. Screen agencies in the nations have made similar funds available. So Screen Scotland had a fund, which is about 2 million, and Film Cymru Wales have just announced a pot of about £500,000 for freelancers that's open till mid-May, I think. I could talk about this more at the end. There are also other things to consider, such as the Young Audiences Content Fund, which obviously we look after, which continues to provide development funding to people working in children's, which hopefully kind of helps provide some kind of support for people at this time. Development is something that can continue at this point to a degree. This stuff that I've talked about is very kind of immediate stuff. You continue to press on it, and we look to provide you with support. One of the things we want to look at as well with COVID-19, and which is increasingly on everybody's minds, obviously, is the medium to long term. What happens about us getting back to work? How on earth do we go back to work in COVID-19? How do you go back onto productions in the age of COVID-19? One of the things that we're doing through the task force at the moment is developing a set of draft guidelines that can be kind of used across production sector, from inward investment, big films, through to kind of independent productions as well, that set out how you can, set out best practice on how you look after your workforce and make sure that they are not put at risk by coming back. The idea behind doing this is that as soon as we have something that's signed off by the whole sector through the task force, as soon as you can show that there's a standard and argue that to people like Public Health England and other devolved agencies, you can kind of get sign off for going back to work. So that's something that's happening at the moment. That will come out for public consultation through people like PACT shortly. So everybody will kind of get a say and be able to kind of voice their concerns with regard to that. That's the biggest question facing us in the long term. And again, we're pushing with DCMS and people to make them understand the priority of us getting back to work, but that things need to happen in order to make that safe too. I'm conscious that I'm kind of short on time, so we can pick up a lot in discussion, but I just wanted to highlight 2 resources that are there for you through the BFI. One thing is a Q&A on COVID-19 and all the kinds of support that are available to businesses as well as freelancers. If you go to our website, bfi.org.uk, you can link through from the banner at the top. There's also an inbox for any queries that you might have, which I think Darren is going to put in the chat. But any kind of concerns that you have, any queries about what is available to you, please get in contact with them and we'll be there to help you as much as we can. So thank you very much. Any questions, post them to me and we can talk in a bit. Thanks.
Thanks, Jack. So we're going to now hear from Victoria, who's going to take us through some of the government schemes that are available.
Hi there, Nico. Thanks for inviting me on to talk today. So yes, I'm an employment and business immigration solicitor, and a month or so ago we hadn't heard of the word furlough. Now we seem to say it 100 times a day. So I'm going to take you through the 2 main schemes that the government has put in place to support both employees and self-employed during the COVID-19 pandemic. And as Jack said, and he neatly lead me into it, there's unfortunately quite a few people who will fall between 2 stools or fall down the cracks in relation to these schemes, because there's no one size fits all. So the first main scheme, and I'm afraid we're dealing quite a lot in acronyms, is the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme, or SES, as I'm going to call it throughout this, just for ease. So this is obviously designed for self-employed individuals. The immediately obvious downside to SES is it's not available to limited company directors who pay themselves via their own service company. It is only for self-employed individuals or partnership members. So under SES, you can claim a taxable grant worth 80% of your trading profits, up to a maximum of £2,500 a month for up to 3 months, and that will be subject to income tax and national insurance contributions. So at the moment it's going to run for 3 months. There is scope for it to be extended. It's not available yet though. HMRC has said it will aim to contact people who are eligible by mid-May and make the payments by June. So according to HMRC, they haven't sent any communications out yet on this. So if you have been contacted asking for bank details, it's likely to be a scam. So just be aware of that. You shouldn't actually be hearing from HMRC until later on in this now month of May. You can make a claim for universal credit whilst you wait for the grant, and I believe Andy da Costa is going to come on to universal credit in a bit more detail after my slot, so I will leave that to him. Happily, by contrast with the coronavirus job retention scheme, which I'll talk about, you can continue to work whilst claiming the grant under the SES. So you can take on other employment, you can undertake volunteer work, and you can continue to take on fresh work and contracts if it's out there. So this all sounds great so far, but there's a whole bunch of eligibility criteria that will cause a lot of people to be excluded. So you must have submitted your self-assessment tax return for the 18-19 tax year by the 23rd of April, so that's already gone. You must have traded in the tax year 19 to 20. You must be trading when you apply, or you would be trading but for COVID-19. You must intend to continue to trade in 2021 tax year. You must have lost profits due to coronavirus. You must have made a profit of £50,000 or less, and you must receive more than half of your total income via self-employment. So those final 2 eligibility criteria, the profit level and your income and whether or not it's derived from self-employment, are probably going to be the main barriers for most people. So in terms of when HMRC are deciding if you're eligible for the grant, and if so, for how much, they will take into account total profit, total income, in the 18-19 tax year if you didn't trade prior to that year. So you can have been only trading for a year, but you must have traded for that year and put in your self-assessment already. Or they'll go back and take an average of up to the last 3 tax years, depending on how long you've been trading. So to give a very obvious example, if it was £51,000 profit in 17-18, £49,000 profit in 18-19, then you just hit the £50,000 average and you should be covered. But if you had a fantastic year in 16-17, you made £100,000 of profit, then average over the last 3 years, you'll be exceeding that £50,000 cut-off. So before I go into that in a bit more detail, just to confirm how and when it will be paid, the grant will be 80% of your trading profit or average trading profit divided by 12 to give a monthly amount. HMRC will then pay that amount up to a maximum of £2,500 a month for 3 months. So there's a £7,500 cap, and that will be paid directly into your bank account in one instalment at some point in June. So the clear problems with this scheme for a lot of individuals is there's a really sharp cliff edge for those whose profits in the last 1 to 3 tax years exceed £50,000. There's been lobbying, as far as I'm aware, for this to be tapered, but there's been no movement by the government so far on that. The government's response has been that apparently once you start to exceed £50,000 of profits, the average profit for self-employed individuals is £250,000, which sounds very surprising to me. They cited self-employed partners in law firms, which excludes me. I can just assure the audience before anyone thinks that I'm part of that group. And they don't want to give people who are doing well a windfall. But there's bound to be plenty of people just on that cusp who will unfortunately be cut off as a result. The newly self-employed are also not covered. So whilst lobby groups have asked if a quick 1920 tax return could be lodged, the government said no so far. It doesn't go on for as long as the coronavirus job retention scheme, which I'll come on to shortly. That's running for 4 months. This one runs for 3. And there's the obvious delay. Unless you've got savings to tide you over, you may have had no income coming in for the last 3-4 months, and you will have to wait until June to receive payment. So moving on to the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme, or the CJRS. This is designed for employees. There's an awful lot of detail available on the scheme on gov.uk, but what I've done is pulled out the areas who are most likely to be applicable to freelancers who are operating as directors of their own personal service limited company, because it only applies to those payable, who receive pay through PAYE. So directors paid through PAYE, even if it's paid annually, they can furlough themselves, which means ceasing to work, provided they meet the eligibility criteria, and then they can apply for a grant. Again, covers 80% of their usual monthly salary, up to £2,500 a month, plus associated employer national insurance contributions and minimum automatic enrolment employer pension contributions. This one runs for 4 months from 1st of March, and there is again scope for it to be extended if we need it. You can move on or off furlough, so have periods of working and then not working, provided that each furlough period is for a minimum of 3 weeks. Again, the devil is in the detail in this scheme, so it won't cover dividends drawn down by directors, as Jack referred to when he spoke as well. So if you derive most of your remuneration through dividends, you'll actually receive very little, if anything, under the scheme. You must have been employed and on the PAYE payroll before the cut-off of 19th of March, and the company must have a UK bank account. And quite importantly, you cannot do any work whilst you're furloughed. So it makes it very difficult if you've got much reduced workload, but you still want to service some clients or some contracts. So what can you do whilst you're furloughed? Well, you can seek employment elsewhere. So if you fancy a period of time stacking shelves at Tesco or Sainsbury's, you are welcome to do that under the scheme, or if it will help to top up your income. Directors can fulfil the statutory obligations they owe to their company, but they mustn't generate any commercial revenue or provide any services to or on behalf of the company. And you can engage in training whilst you're furloughed. What's not clear is whether or not you can operate as a sole trader outside your limited company, and whether or not you can engage in non-income generating work such as marketing or communications with your client. There hasn't been that much guidance put out on the do's and don'ts in terms of what you can do. So we are hoping that the government will provide more clarity on this as well. So that's it for those two schemes, Nico. And I think we're now passing on to Andy.
Great. Thanks, Victoria. Yes, so Andy's going to talk us through things, including the universal credit. So please, Andy, go ahead.
So I'm going to run through the measures introduced by HMRC to defer any tax payments that may fall due. But please note, these tax payments will be payable. They're still due in the future. HMRC have set up a helpline that allows businesses or self-employed individuals who are concerned about paying their taxes due to the coronavirus to get practical help and advice. With regards to the specific taxes, the current advice is as follows. VAT. HMRC have said if you owe tax between April and June, that you still need to submit your VAT return, but you don't actually need to pay it at the moment, and you can defer the payment until the 31st of March 2021. However, if you're on a direct debit, you need to cancel the direct debit so they don't automatically take that amount from your bank account, and then you can reinstate it in the future. PAYE is what the employers need to pay. Because employers, if they're furloughing staff, they're getting the money back via the job retention scheme. We're encouraging companies to pay the PAYE because the government are helping them, so they should be paying those amounts as they fall due rather than getting behind with those taxes. Corporation tax is payable for limited companies, and it's payable 9 months after the year end. So for lots of clients, they might have the money saved away, but they're not wanting to spend the money because they know that they need that money to live with. So it's like a loan from the government. What we're encouraging those people to do with our clients is give them HMRC a call and explain the situation. And in all the circumstances I've experienced, HMRC have said, call us back in 3 months, look to pay the money then. So hopefully people can do that. And have to stress that this is all a deferral because the money will need to be paid in the future. Self-assessment tax for freelancers, individuals that may be receiving dividends from their limited companies, normally they should be paying tax the 31st of July. And again, this has been deferred until January. Again, it's another deferral, but what it means is that the individual doesn't need to pay a large amount of tax out at the moment. The reality is we don't know where we are at the moment, and it's just managing that cash flow. We're all in the same boat. We're getting lots of phone calls from people, and we're just saying, speak to the revenue. It's a person doing a job, and they just need to communicate with the revenue and tell them they can't pay the tax. In addition to this deferral, the government have just announced a new coronavirus bounce back loan scheme, where you can borrow between £2,000 and £50,000 as an amount, but they haven't announced the criteria for borrowing. Hopefully this is going to come out maybe today because it goes live on Monday, and I've been told it's a 2-page form that you fill in online, and it's meant to be a lot simpler than the other loan schemes. With this, you're not going to pay any interest or any capital for the next 12 months. So it's giving people a breather, but remember, you still need to pay it back in the future. Other things to consider, because it's all about the cash flow. For freelancers and for directors of the limited companies, you can contact your bank and ask for a 3-month mortgage holiday. And what they do is they calculate the interest and the capital and you pay that back in the future. The same they've just introduced for car loans. You can call your finance company up and get a deferral there for like a 3-month holiday. Again, you need to pay that back. And they've just introduced the same with credit cards to have a 3-month holiday there. Finally, it's an area I don't really get that involved with. There's universal credits available. So again, if someone needs the money and they fit the criteria, mainly they haven't got any money in the bank and they haven't got income coming in, you can do an online application for universal credits, and I've been told that they come back to you quite quickly and hopefully get some money to you. If there's any questions that anyone's got, please pose them to me and hopefully I can answer them. And if you want to email me any questions after today, my contact details should be on the in the pack. Thank you.
There is one that has just come in from Alison Warner, which I'm assuming is directed at you. She's asked, well, she said it's always good to know what you can claim and what you can't pay back. So is she right in thinking a grant you don't pay back and a loan you have to pay back?
Correct. The loans you need to pay back, even though they're 100% backed by the government, you still need to pay them back. A grant you don't pay back, but some of them are taxable. So the self-employment payment they're receiving, that is taxable. But yeah, but the money is yours. You don't need to pay back a grant.
I see. And we've had another question for you come in, Andy. So if you take the credit card or mortgage holidays, is the interest you have to pay back inflated or the rate you were paying?
It depends on the actual credit card provider, and you need to confirm that with them. My gut feel is it's not going to be any more than what you're paying, but you need to speak to them, and they can give you a breakdown of what you will be paying in the future.
Great. Yes, please keep those questions coming in. And just quickly, what was the name of the loan? The 2 to 50k loan that's
called the bounce back loan. Coronavirus bounce back loan, and again I've put the link in the pack as well that everyone's going to be distributed.
Great.
But again, there's limited information on it as of today, but because it's going live on Monday, I'd expect something to be announced later on today. Okay,
cool. Thanks for that, Andy. Yeah, obviously not the sexiest topic for a Friday afternoon, but it's tough out there, so yeah, it's really useful information. So now we're going to move on, and we've got Emma, so who's going to talk to us from the perspective of a writer.
Hi, yeah, I'm Emma. I'm a writer, and obviously I think some of the issues faced by writers will be the same as those faced by other freelancers, but obviously it's a vast topic, as people have already pointed out. We are all in slightly different boats, although facing the same issues. So I'm probably going to mostly talk about it from a writer's POV. I am also TV chair of the Writers Guild, so I can, who have of course been sort of very much on this and trying to collate all the information and find ways to help people in this crisis. And I think obviously we need to look at the short, medium and long term, which all have their problems. Writers belong to the group who most of our work in television and stage and everything is done, of course, in pre-production. So people who mostly work in pre and post are kind of experiencing a delayed effect to an extent or worse, so that things were carrying on to point. Obviously, the most immediate effect have been on people like cast and crew who work in production on shoots or on stage. And of course, that's been absolutely catastrophic. To an extent, the work of writers has carried on, but obviously we can, with medium-term issues. And then, of course, writers in the TV world, writers who write for soap have had some of the worst effects because that has stopped. Development is still continuing. And I've spoken to a lot of different producers who are working on development, and although some of the smaller companies are very worried about the future, and there is a fear that smaller companies may go under, I think there is also a lot of confidence that things will eventually carry on and be okay. The Guild, of course, is here to advocate for writers and writers in soap, and even though there is an issue for writers that you can't get your principal photography payment, we would argue that if writers are being asked to wait until how things turn out for because of storylines being changed because of COVID, or being given substantial rebriefs. I think the Guild would argue that they should have their acceptance payment, and even if they can't have principal photography, and that serious changes would necessitate a rebrief. So I think it is business as usual, and you should not feel afraid to ask for your fee for work that's been done. If you go to the Guild website, there is actually a very comprehensive resource on COVID information that's not just about Guild things, and that is available to non-members as well. And they've got some quite sort of good short-term practical advice. There is a Guild welfare fund that people who are in serious financial short-term difficulties can apply to for a small grant. The Society of Authors has a similar scheme. The Audio and Radio Emergency Fund does too. Arts Council England, Creative Scotland, and the Arts Council of Wales all have similar schemes. So these are sort of viewed as emergency grants. So Writers Guild members can obviously apply for the Writers Guild Hardship Fund, and those members who are still doing well and working through this, maybe you might want to make a contribution for your fellow writers. I have done that because I was lucky enough to be in work. And so, of course, we've also been talking about the many people who've fallen through the cracks, as the other panelists have mentioned. The Guild got together with other unions through the Federation of Entertainment Unions, which includes BEC2, Equity, the NUJ, and we've been lobbying. We've sent the Guild has contacted Rishi Sunak, pointing out all the people who are falling through the cracks for various reasons, such as being on PAYE contracts, which have stopped with no chance of furloughing, such as running as a limited company, and we have sent Rishi Sunak, along with the rest of the entertainment union, 7 points petitioning for help for these workers. And of course, we've been talking about a lot what's going to happen when reduction reopens. We've had a confidential letter from the British Film Council today suggesting ways that we might be able to film and record shows whilst being safer. We've also been talking, the Guild has been talking to the BBC every week, trying to catch up. As we'll all have seen, certain productions around the world are reopening. So it's a question of how to keep things safe whilst, of course, being fair. I think, with writers, obviously we can do a lot of work from home, but we don't want to encourage people to exclude writers or keep them out of the loop. And in general, for all employees, people who might have to be on set, obviously the Guild has been doing a lot of work on equality in the past, and sort of making sure that people with caring responsibilities, people with chronic conditions, people who are disabled are given equal opportunities. So, and of course, there is a concern that when we start going back to work, if it's very risky, those people will be left behind. We had a TV committee meeting on Tuesday, and I should imagine, like most meetings these days, it became quite divided between doves and hawks, people who are sort of, we've got to get back to work at any point, and people who are like, no, hold on a minute, safety first. So it's an ongoing situation, but I would say check out the Guild's website, which can point you to all sorts of links of useful things, both Guild related and not Guild related, and there are for people who are in desperate need of some quick cash, there are some funds you can apply to, which will decide fairly quickly. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. I've just got a quick question. I've been speaking to producers in the States and here this week, and one of them was talking about how so much is going to rely on talent being willing to work, basically. So
Yes.
Do you have any sense of the kind of general feeling amongst the acting community about when they would feel comfortable going back to work?
I think a lot of, I mean, and this was sort of what came up on Tuesday, I think a lot of people, a lot of actors, just like a lot of the population, are desperate to work, and I think they would take the risk. But I think there is also a sort of an ethical question of how much do you allow people's, people saying, well, people have got mortgages, and it's sort of like, I think it's always like, yes, how much do you allow people's, if somebody's desperation for money is balanced against a real risk to their health, that's an enormous ethical question. So I think, and that is why I said the meeting got quite heated with because there's a lot to be said on, as with the wider question of relaxing lockdown, there's a lot to be said on both sides of sort of, chronic lack of money and desperation is bad for people's health, but so is catching this virus. As somebody who's, I've had it and I've come through it, and and I can sort of think, oh, I'd take the risk, but I think a lot of people don't come through it, and it can lead to tragedy. So sorry, I don't have a clear answer on that, but it's a dilemma that's out there we all need to grapple with.
Oh yeah, that's fine. I mean, there's very few clear answers at the moment to most questions. I was also going to move on to the subject of the difference between live action productions and animated productions, both of which are a pretty big business for the kids industry. And as I understand it, animated productions have been relatively unaffected by the production shutdown because studios have been able to move productions into people's homes and animators animating from home. Could writers, pivot who aren't already, writing for animated series? Could they potentially pivot to animated series? I don't know if that's a bit of a simplistic question, but is that
a lot of writers? I mean, I've done some animation. I think a lot of writers have done both, particularly in the children's world. I should imagine, as you say, that if a lot of productions aren't happening and an animation is happening. I mean, of course, a lot of animation, ideally, they like to have the talent together so they can bounce off each other, and some sort of high-profile talent prefers that. But I think at the moment we can understand that that's just not possible, and so I think a lot of people isolating and recording separately is working. I think obviously if animation, animation series are usually sort of staffed up, and it's always hard to get an opportunity on anything, but I'm sure there'll be a lot of competition to get onto animation series now, but certainly I think it would be worth people sort of trying. I mean, of course, there's always competition to get onto any show, and the competition will only have increased if other shows are shutting their doors, but I think certainly that's something worth knowing about. And I have spoken to people doing radio as well who say that production is continuing there. So yes, animation and audio are good things to be working on at the moment.
So we're going to open it up to the general Q&A now. And at this point, if we were at CMC in Sheffield, there'd be a roving microphone going around. We've had a few questions that have come in on the Q&A. So both of them for Andy, and you have replied to them in the chat, which is great, but it might be helpful if we also just talk about them as well. So a question from Jennifer Booth, who I think is a friend of CMC as the photographer. She asks, so universal credit or working tax, can you apply for both?
As far as I'm aware, you can apply for both because you're probably already getting the working tax credits. So this is another one that you can apply for. So yes is the answer.
And what happens when your credit rating, if you take a holiday with bank credit card? Yeah, what happens with your credit rating if you take a holiday with bank credit cards and mortgages?
As far as I'm aware, it doesn't adversely affect your credit history. But when you're taking it out, when you're speaking to the banks or the finance provider, just confirm that. But my understanding is you should be safe.
Okay, great. Jack, you said you were going to talk a bit more about the fundraising activities at the BFI.
So yes, I was just going to. I know one of the things that's come in on the Q&A was just to go over a number of the emergency funds that have been set up to help people mitigate the financial impact of COVID-19 and the associated loss of work. I know Emma had a number to contribute here as well, so I may pass to you, Emma, after I've kind of listed mine, if that's all right. But yeah, basically a couple of kind of different screen agencies and charities have made funding available to freelancers to kind of help meet the gap financially. So there's excuse me, a couple that have run already, and they're currently closed, but I would recommend keeping an eye on them because I know that they're looking at kind of doing subsequent rounds of funding if possible. So that includes the Film and TV Charities Emergency Fund, which was offering grants of up to £2,500 per person, which was run in partnership with us, as well as with contributions from Netflix, Warner Media, and others. I'll post the link in the chat now because it would be good to set up an alert on that because they're looking. So they had a call for like £5 million worth of grants, and they had a budget of £3 million. So there's clearly huge demand and there's a desire to help as many people as possible. So they're currently fundraising to do another round of awards. Other ones to note are Screen Scotland. They have a bridging bursary for people working in film and TV specifically. Again, that's kind of in between rounds at the moment, but I know they had a £2 million budget and I believe they're looking to do further work with that. One of the ones that is live currently is one run by Welsh screen agency, Film Cymru Wales, which makes grants of up to £1,500 available to people working in film and TV. Applications are open till mid-May. Again, I'll post the link imminently as soon as I finish talking so people can look at that. Yeah, okay, so they're the ones that I would point to in the immediate. And then Emma, I know you had a couple of ones that you were talking to and had up on the screen as well.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just replying to an online question. Yes, the Writers Guild has an emergency fund, which is for Writers Guild members, and the Society of Authors also has one granting up to £2,000. I'll put these links in the questions in a minute. The Audio and Radio Emergency Fund helps people whose main source of income is ordinarily primarily radio and audio. Arts Council England has got a fund where individual artists can apply for up to £2,500. Creative Scotland and the Arts Council of Wales as well. So I'll put these links in the chat. Okay.
Sorry, just to come in on the end as well. The Film and TV Charity are also running a scheme. In addition to grants, they're doing a loan scheme, so you can do a short-term loan where you'd get your money to kind of cover yourself for now, but that would be a repayable thing as well. So they're all coming in the chat now.
Thanks, Jack. I'm aware there's some building work going outside my flat, so hopefully that's not too audible. Emma, there's a question for you. So money worries and applying for grants aside, what could writers be doing at the moment whilst waiting for the lockdown to end?
Oh yes, I've just actually sent a reply to that. I think obviously you can write specs. The gossip is that I think commissioners, from what I can hear, is sort of they'll be sort of people are actually reading, which is one sort of strange advantage because nothing's in production, so producers are having a little more time to read. People don't want scripts directly about COVID or lockdown. So it seems sort of unless you're sort of there's a direct opportunity or what you want to put on yourself. I think people sort of are thinking we will want to move on soon after this. So I think it's a good chance to write spec scripts. I think it's also a chance to make contact with people. I mean, the advice is usually if you really like a producer's work or a company's work and think you'd like to work with them, get in touch with them and say that. And, this could actually be a good time for that because, because they won't be on set. They won't, a lot of small companies, their resources can be almost completely taken up when they've got something big in production. But as nothing's like literally filming now, it could be a good chance to get in touch. So I think, keep doing the usual things, but don't particularly write about COVID. Apparently that's not what people are looking for.
Yes, I've heard that as well. Not what people want to watch at the moment. So although there's a question here that although the current schemes are covering people up to June and July, in the film and TV industry, it feels the real squeeze on incomes may come much further down the line as production slowly gets back up and running. Are there any thoughts about what assistance may be in place at that point?
This is complete guesswork on my part, obviously, but we have already seen one extension to the coronavirus job retention scheme. So one obvious possibility would be either further extension or some kind of tapering down in the support that's out there. So at the moment, you kind of have to be completely out of work if you're employed, or you're not allowed to work in order to get the grant. You are allowed to work if you're self-employed and still get the grant. So I suspect if we feel a knock-on further into 2020, possibly even 2021, who knows, I could see that this support possibly being tapered down but extended.
Can I just come in on the back of Victoria a second as well, on that issue of the kind of squeeze that comes further down the line. So through the task force, speaking to various unions and production companies, I know that this is something that is very much on a lot of people's minds, that it's when everybody kind of comes back to work, but where you have additional financial pressure, given what's happened, that you begin to feel a squeeze in a different kind of way. We are obviously in a position at the moment where there are a lot of unknowns when we will go back to work, what the state of play will be. But one of the things that we're looking to do at the BFI through the task force is we're putting together this kind of package, right? This almost sector deal of mitigations that we need to make sure everything is working as effectively as possible in the long run. So that includes the stuff that I talked about kind of protocols on how to act kind of more in a safe way on production. But I think one of the key things that it will look at, and one of the things it will make recommendations to government on, is that question of how greater security and better treatment is ensured in this brave new world for freelancers and workers as well, to make sure that they aren't getting the brunt of that additional pressure. One of the big lessons of this whole thing, right, is that the insecurity that so many freelancers face is a risk to the continued function of this industry, and it's something that we want to look at and seriously help remedy in the future as a lesson of this whole thing. So thinking is still happening, but I just encourage you to input anything that you can think of that would help combat that as an issue, to your unions, to people like the Children's Media Conference, so we can think about what policy levers we can recommend in future to help with that situation.
Thanks, Jack. And final question, for anyone who wants to pick it up, is about the campaign work that is or isn't going on. Do you feel like there is enough campaign work going on to kind of make sure freelancers' voices are heard, and which ones are the most prominent at the moment?
I know that there is a lot of the Writers Guild and the Federation of Entertainment Unions and the TUC are doing a lot of campaigning, because I think there are all sorts of people who've slipped through the cracks. UK Parliament is calling for evidence of impact on the effect of COVID-19 on the cultural and creative industries. And I think if you look, and again, whether or not you're a member, you can go to the Writers Guild site, just click to find the Writers Guild of GreatBritain.org, and you can click on the link about COVID-19, and you will find links there to campaigning as well. So and obviously it's not just their campaigns, they're sort of following all the various campaigns of freelancers. So hopefully you should be able to find information through that. You don't have to be a member.
I just echo Emma again. I think just speak to everybody that you possibly can, whether that be unions, trade bodies, whether it be people like Children's Media Conference. Everybody is definitely banging the drum. I think one of the things that we have to remember is that everybody across every sector of the economy is currently feeling this is feeling this, and everybody has a different thing that they're working on. So there is a lot of stuff to cover at the moment, but rest assured that people are there making the case.
Yeah, and IPSC, they've got a whole free COVID-19 Q&A webinar section. You don't need to be a member, all focused on freelancers across different sectors. A lot of useful information that they've put together free of charge for access online. Great.
Thanks, everyone. That was really insightful, and we've got some positive comments coming through saying that people have found it valuable, so that's great. And I'll just want to remind everyone that the links will be available in the blog later on, so you just need to go to the CMC page for this event by the end of the weekend.